Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. The only podcast where it's okay to talk in band. On this podcast, you will be able to hear conversations with some of the greatest names in wind band conducting, composing, and arranging. We'll also visit with great college, high school, middle school, and elementary band directors to get their thoughts on various aspects of being a band director. We'll have regular check-ins with instrument specialists, music dealers, and instrument repair professionals. And if that's not enough, we'll even have regular conversations with Dr. Tim, who will help keep us motivated. That's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And now, here's Charlie.
Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends, and this, our 37th podcast in the series. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be with you, and if you are a long-time listener, or if this is your first time, welcome. I am happy to have you with us for another fun conversation. Today, I have the chance to present to you a conversation with Eric Tinkler and Dr. Philip Payne of Kansas State University. They host a podcast for music education majors called Not Your Forte. I had the pleasure of being on their podcast earlier this fall, and I really enjoyed speaking with both of them. Eric is a senior music education major, and his idea for the podcast was to create some content for college music majors and young teachers in the profession. And it is really neat that he approached his music education professor at K-State, Dr. Philip Payne, for some guidance, and together they have put together a really neat program. What I find great about this is how Dr. Payne is using this medium to help develop a student who has expressed a sincere interest in learning more, in becoming a music education professional. I think you'll find that Eric Tinkler is a pretty sharp college senior, and he's going to make some school a great school band director. You know, there's nothing more fun to watch and experience than youthful exuberance. Young people who are out to set the world on fire. They have endless ideas and they have endless energy, and they just can't understand why something can't be done. In our music education profession, those young people are not the norm. And when they do identify themselves, we need to do everything in our power to support them and to guide them, to help groom them. I was watching a National League football game last night with a team whose quarterback is identified to be a star. He was signed to a professional contract worth over $100 million. And right now, he just cannot get the job done. He currently leads the league in the number of times he has been sacked, and it is apparent that he has lost his confidence. As I listen to sports talk shows, this topic has been coming up as well. Without a good offensive line to support him, he becomes a sitting duck, someone who will experience getting hit and getting hit way too often. And when that happens, that confidence disappears. And with that confidence disappearing, so does that talent. You know, the same is true in teaching and in preparing the next generation of great music teachers. We have to have someone with that youthful energy. And when we do, and if they're not groomed or they're not guided, then we have someone that will be a sitting duck. They face rejection, not because someone told them they couldn't or that it was wrong. No, they face rejection because someone was not there to recognize an ability or a talent that this person had, and not only recognized it, but provided gentle guidance and support along the way. In a sense, that person or persons serve as an offensive line that protects them from getting tackled too often, from losing their confidence. There are many young teachers in the field, and they need help. Not in terms of do this or do that. No, they need help by us recognizing that which they do best and providing that compliment or gentle course correction. Something that encourages them. Encourage, to give support, confidence, or hope to someone. Something that encourages them to continue, to find the next level, to pursue their dreams and aspirations. During this pandemic, which hopefully we might be seeing a light at the far end of the tunnel with the vaccine, there are many teachers who need our help and our support. Think of those you may know who are early in their teaching years, maybe their first year of teaching, and reach out to them. Create a relationship. Make a new friend. Help guide them and be a part of that protective line that is going to help them win the game of music education, to help them put music in the lives of their students, to affirm their abilities of being or becoming a master teacher. I can think of no better gift we can give to others during this time of the year than the gift of our friendship and support. So do it today. Pick up the phone and call someone. Send an email or a text, or just write a note and suggest a time to just chat about them, about life, about the importance of being a music teacher, and what kind of impact they can have on the lives of their students. We'll be back with our conversation with Eric Tinkler and Dr. Philip Payne, hosts of Not Your Forte podcast, right after this.
This is Drew with thepodcastingstore.com, your one-stop shop for everything podcasting and remote learning, and a proud sponsor of Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Listen to what we've been working on in this clip from our podcast. So something that I've been giving a lot of thought to recently is how do you select the gear that you need to get your message out? Now, whether you're doing a podcast or you're teaching a remote class, the thought process behind all of this is exactly the same, because you have competition out there, whether it's other podcasts or YouTube videos or other teachers, things like that. And the problem that you're running into is that the equipment that you're using needs to enhance your message and not stand in the way of it. But it can be kind of confusing to figure out what do you need and how do you use it? Where do you start? So the way that I approach a problem like this is to start at the end. And in this case, the end is who is going to be consuming your content and how are they going to be consuming it? So for example, if you're teaching a remote class. To hear the rest of this podcast, please visit thepodcastingstore.com, your one-stop shop for everything podcasting and remote learning. This is Drew with thepodcastingstore.com. Now back to Charlie.
Well, this whole podcasting thing has just taken the country by storm and taken the world by storm, I guess. And it was back in December when a buddy of mine, the president of Eastman Musical Instrument Company, encouraged me to start a podcast. And I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And the learning curve was kind of steep, but I got her going. And, the more I get into this, the more I find that there's more people doing podcasts, and especially more people in the band world. And I think it's fantastic. And this summer, I had the opportunity to be invited to be on a podcast called Not Your Forte, a guide to keeping music education simple. And it's run by a young man from Kansas State University. Almost swore there, guys.
Yeah.
From Kansas State.
I might have to leave if you would accuse me of going there.
Mea culpa. From Kansas State University, Eric Tinkler, who's a music education major, and working with him is the assistant professor of music education, Dr. Philip Payne. And man, it's just a lot of fun to have a couple of my new friends and have you guys joining us for my podcast today. So welcome to Band Talk.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's great to be here.
Eric, as I understand it, you're a music ed major at K-State. So tell us about where you grew up and how you became involved in music.
Well, just starting out, I my hometown's Rose Hill, Kansas, just a small town outside of Wichita. Small high school, not too terribly small or anything, but in terms of talking about music, I got involved in music 5th grade. I chose to play the French horn. What a mistake I made. I chose it purely off of how it looked. I'm like, oh, that looks cool. Never heard it before. And I don't think the entire year of 5th grade, I played a correct note. But honestly, just kind of going through school, I had a lot of interests. I thought about becoming a pilot before I realized I'm afraid of heights. That didn't work out. Looked into politics for a bit, realized I'm not into lying too much. So I ultimately I decided teaching was going to be something I wanted to do. And music came in kind of really late, actually. Band was always something I did, I enjoyed, but it wasn't something I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do that for all my life. I was kind of looking, I'm like, okay, I know I want to teach because I enjoy helping out others. I enjoy seeing that kind of fire in the eyes of like people when they get something. And I thought for a while, I'm like, I'm going to be a history teacher. I was really into like kind of like Civil War history, World War history and stuff like that. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll be a history teacher. And I went on a visit to not Kansas State, but Fort Hays State. Where I was looking to attend there, and I was there kind of looking at the history department and stuff. Well, I was thinking about maybe doing stuff with music still, but music's going to be something I want to do. And I knew marching band was going to be something I wanted to do with that. And the love for Kansas State was actually a shock for my family when I first kind of said I wanted to go to K-State. My older brother went to KU. I'm a family full of Jayhawks, unfortunately. It's always interesting whenever, especially this weekend, KU and K-State play. So I'm excited to see K-State win. But Kansas State, I came to the campus 1 year for a band camp. I fell in love with the program, with Dr. Trace, with the beautiful campus. And ever since, I haven't looked back. I haven't questioned it. And I just enjoy being here at K-State, being in music education. And I'm so excited to get out and teach this next year.
That's great. What are your best memories from your high school experience? Remember looking back at that?
So thinking back to my just huge shout out to my band directors. I had David Bartley, Jim Hollingsworth, and Todd Schultz were my band directors back there, and they really cultivated such a wonderful learning environment. Just speaking of memories of high school, I was involved in everything. Small school, so I was everything from on leadership team for band to team captain of the football team. Some of the best memories I think really happened with the music program. We had a horn section of 6 guys. We had just one band or whatever. So there was a lot of high school boys. So naturally, just I can't share some of the stories, some of the things we talked about or anything, but it was just the camaraderie of hanging out with his friends each and every day, doing stupid high school boy stuff. Whenever we went on band trips, we went on our trip to Dallas my freshman year, and that was so much fun. Or a trip to Branson a couple years later. So a lot of it just really ties closely to my experiences with band, actually.
So how did you get the idea to start a podcast for music education majors?
Okay, so the podcast idea, there's a couple different aspects of it. So first, I've been listening to a lot of different other podcasts, either both music related and non-music related. It's just something I kind of started picking up doing while I'm going around driving, because I used to go back and forth between Rose Hill, Manhattan a lot. I didn't really care for listening to music on the radio because I would fall asleep. I'd get kind of sleepy and tired. So I'm like, okay, I need to be stimulating my brain a little bit more. So I switched to podcast. One podcast that I started listening to that kind of started the gears grinding in the head about, oh, maybe I could do a podcast, was the After Sectionals podcast that's run by Darcy Williams. And before we started recording, we chatted a little bit. We had Darcy on last week for our podcast, which is so much fun. And then what really spurred me into action was I attended the Conn-Selmer Institute the summer before I kind of got things rolling, before that semester started. I'm like, you know what? I think it was a really inspiring 3.5 days or whatever, a really great opportunity to meet a lot of great music educators. And I'm like, you know what? I think I can actively do something to try to impact music education here. And I thought there was kind of a deficit in terms of what's aimed towards music education students, people currently in college. And so naturally I'm like, okay, all right, I got this idea. Now I need to take action on that. And the action started out with reaching out to Dr. Payne and figuring out, okay, what do I need to run a podcast? And then we went forward from there, and we're here today. And it's such a fun journey.
That's great. And Dr. Philip Payne, you're assistant professor of music education. And before we talk about what got you roped into this podcast, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you grew up and what got you into music and all that good stuff.
Absolutely. So I grew up in a town sandwiched between Oklahoma City and Norman called Moore. So Moore, Oklahoma, better known as Tornado Alley. It just seems to have a tornado magnet there, but that's essentially where I grew up. And growing up through high school, I played basketball. I was also on the track and field team as well as in the band all the way through. Music was always both my parents were in band growing up. And so, uh, from the very first, I was always encouraged, be a music in some way, shape, or form. So all the way through elementary school, obviously, I sung in honor choirs. I was a soprano one all the way until my sixth grade year, and then my voice dropped, and I went all the way down to bass. So that was a lot of fun. But when I decided to join band, I really wanted to be percussion. And my parents at the time, they always deny this story, but it's true. I said, Mom, Dad, I want to play percussion. And they were like, well, the coolest kids when we were in band were all trombone players. So we think you might enjoy trombone. And so they talked me out of percussion. And so my lifelong journey with the trombone began there. We actually didn't start in my district. We didn't start until seventh grade. And so it's kind of later than most. A lot of schools will start fifth, sixth grade year. We started during the seventh grade year, but I just fell in love with it. And my junior high band director, in between my seventh and eighth grade year, pulled me aside and said, I think what we're going to do is we're going to have you play with the ninth grade band next year. We need some extra trombone players. And so I got moved up into the ninth grade band. And from there, it was just kind of always pushing myself to, try and be a little bit better and push myself. And I got that from both sides, both my athletic endeavors and also through music, and just kind of like this self-driven sense all the way through. Injuries really kind of played a part a lot in helping me kind of like make my decision. I loved basketball. And I loved teaching all the way through. So, I mean, my idea at that point, and the irony in all of this is one of my role models for coaching at that point growing up was actually Roy Williams, who was the head coach at KU at the time. I loved watching his coaching, his demeanor, his style, and knowledge of the game. And so I always enjoyed teaching from an early age. My mom's a third grade teacher. And all of my families have either been teachers or involved in the schools in some way, shape, or form. My dad taught nuclear power school in the Navy, and so it just came naturally. And so as I started thinking about, well, what do I want to do? I was very similar to Eric, had tried to figure out what I wanted my career path to be. And I knew at that point when I was graduating, I knew I wanted to study music education. I enjoyed people. I enjoyed interacting with others. I enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed sharing what I had with others and helping others find their own passion in things. And so that led me down the road of music education. Now, knowing that, I knew that I wasn't fully entrenched yet in knowing if I wanted to go into the classroom or not. I knew I enjoyed working with others, teaching, helping, but I saw it maybe manifesting itself in other ways. And so the three options that I had about halfway through my undergrad was I either wanted to go into seminary and become a Methodist minister. I wanted to go to law school and work my way into practicing law, but then work my way into politics. I still get that inkling from time to time of I am always called back to public service. And so right now I'm even thinking of ways, okay, can I do school board? And so working with my family that way. But then there was just this pull after I had my practicum, and my sophomore year in college, I get a call from the local middle school band director. And he said, look, we don't have enough money to hire a staff member, but I don't have a planned time. So would you come in and teach beginning brass for me? And I said, yeah, I would love to. And so my first teaching gig was teaching beginning brass at Weatherford Middle School in Weatherford, Oklahoma. So I did my undergrad at Southwestern Oklahoma State University, studied with my band director was James South, and trombone professor was Robert Chambers. And they said, yeah, take that opportunity. So I taught there as a teaching beginning brass at Weatherford Middle School, and that's where I came to love working with beginners. I mean, it was just a lot of fun. I loved teaching the instrument, interacting with the students, and just having fun making music. And that began to build, and I began to see it as a career and what I wanted to do. And from there, I went on and I finished my master's. My master's was, I did both trombone performance and music education. And so I've got my thesis is actually on 20th century trombone sonatas and relating them to the 18th century sonata form and how it all connects together, which was a lot of fun. And then I taught for several years in the Moore public schools, and from there decided, I wanted to go back because I wanted to be able. I remember those first years of teaching and thinking, okay, I got so much great advice and help from my mentors, Dr. Terry Segrist, Dr. James South, and now is Dr. David Teachout. David Teachout was my junior high band director. Mark Miller, who is one of my mentors, both professionally and as a student. And I thought, there's a lot more I can give back. And so that's what spurred me really to go back and get my doctorate. So that's kind of a brief oral history of how we got to where we are today.
Wow. So you're a band director for a while, I know, at Rogers State in Claremore, Oklahoma. And then you shift to K-State and you're teaching music ed. And then you got this student that comes up and says, Dr. Payne, I've been thinking about, we're going to create this podcast for music education majors. So when Eric came to you with that, what was your initial reaction?
Oh, actually, I don't think I hesitated at all. I think my initial reaction was, yes, we need to do that. Because number one, part of my role here at K-State, so it's multifaceted. So I'm the chair of music ed. So I basically oversee the curriculum and try and identify where our strengths and weaknesses are as a program and what we need. I'm also the lead advisor for all of our undergraduate music education majors. So I get to see all of them from the time that they're a freshman, first semester on campus, up until the point where they walk across the stage with their bachelor's degree. And there are points, and in fact, I just had this conversation, and as Eric can attest today, of every student that goes through the program, there are these peaks and valleys that occur. And to know that you're not alone is so important. And the idea that we've all gone through this before, but that we have a support system that knows, okay, yes, I can empathize. I know what you're going through. Here's how you address that. Here's how you can face that and know that you've got support behind you. And what better way to do that than to hit the airwaves and be able to try and saturate a podcast with all of this information and be able to share it more than just within the confines of my office or the confines of our courtyard downstairs where I might just have a passing conversation with a student. We can be able to bend the ears of so many others. And not only that, I think one of the most profound things that I've experienced through this process actually is the interactions that I have with practicing teachers. I've had several that have responded to some of the posts that I've shared of recordings or of episodes, and they said, this is exactly what I needed to hear at this time. Thank you so much for doing this. I wish we would have had this when I was going through school. But the overall sentiment is that even as practicing teachers, we need these reminders. we need these reminders that we're not alone and that people are struggling every day. And there are these peaks and valleys even after you graduate. Once you graduate, the stress doesn't disappear. The peaks and valleys don't disappear. They just present themselves differently. And so we need to know that we are our greatest asset when it comes to being able to empathize and share and show support with each other.
Yeah, that's right on. That's exactly that. We need it now more than ever. Well, Eric, you mentioned you got the idea when you're doing Conselmer Institute, and you launched this thing in September of 2019. How steep was the learning curve to get all the equipment and get this baby up and running?
I remember the first episode of the podcast that Dr. Payne, we were sitting in his office with one computer. I had purchased one mic, which I had done very little research into. And we're just like, all right, let's just hit record and let's go.
Oh my gosh. And the microphone was set up on a piano bench. And so we've got it balanced there. And then we're trying to run it through GarageBand. And we're like, well, yeah, I think that's going to work.
So yeah, I definitely have listened back to some of the first couple episodes. I'm like, oh goodness, why did anyone listen to this? but and that's part of the experience though of doing anything new. And for anyone who's looking to ever doing anything, whether it's a podcast, whether it's whatever that they haven't done before, don't be afraid of doing it, and don't be afraid of it not being good when you first do it. We're talking about a lot of things with music here. You're not going to be good when you first pick up your horn. You're going to have to figure it out. You're going to have to practice, and you get better over time. It's not instant. Oh, I'm great at podcasting now. So it's definitely been a process to figure out how to do it better, to kind of listen. I think this is going to be one of the most useful things for when I'm teaching, because I have become very aware of how I speak, and for better or for worse. But yeah,
podcasting is kind of like learning music. There is no perfect immersion point. Just start somewhere, and and you're going to learn from it. I look back at my very first one in March, and it's had the most listens of all of my podcasts, and it's the absolute worst one, fidelity wise and everything like that. But well, what the heck, they'll get through it. So Dr. Payne, I trust that you're making Eric do all the heavy lifting. Is that right?
I think so. One of the things that it's been a shared governance thing from the technical aspects. I basically defer to Eric through all of that. So I let him kind of walk through the process as we have expanded into getting guests. And as he and I have started to talk about different parts of the show, I've been able to help out a little bit more as far as being able to reach out and have people join us. But in terms of the heavy lifting of the day-to-day operations, absolutely. Eric is fantastic on top of everything as we go through and making sure that we've got all the equipment, got everything lined up. And wherever I can help and step in and ease some of the load, I do that, especially this time of semester where things start to pick up a little bit. I'll be able to step in and help. But ultimately, I think Eric said it best. There's a lot of things that you learn about yourself through this process, and that you learn about communication, that you learn about organization. And then honestly, what's going to pay off there is the technological education that he's getting, the organizational education, the basically setting up, like when we go in and we talk about a season, he's already thinking like a teacher from the perspective of, all right, when I go in as a teacher and I've got to pick my 4 performances for the year, what music are we going to cover? What styles do I want to hit? What are the weaknesses of my group and how are we going to improve those? What are the strengths so that I can highlight my strong players? And then how are we going to meld all of these together into great performances while improving the musicianship of our individual musicians within our groups? We use the same skill set and the same knowledge and all of that, putting together seasons for an episode. It's just in a more compact style. And I think being able to think that far ahead and outside of the box is a great skill for young teachers. And so this has really been able to put that under a magnifying glass. And some of the conversations we've had, I mean, starting with going through 7 Habits this summer with our book talk, and then season 4 starting to talk about pedagogy and how do we apply what we learn in methods courses in the real world, has been absolutely fantastic. And so I know that's a long answer to a short question, but yeah, he takes, a good 80%, and I just chip in where I can to make his life a little bit easier. But this really is his brainchild.
That's great. And Eric, what's been your biggest takeaway from doing the podcast?
I think the biggest takeaway from this is the community of music education is such a small, wonderful community. Very, very, not often is it where I reach out to someone to where they're like, oh, no, I don't want to do this at all. It's either like, yeah, let's do this. Let's figure out a time, where it's like, I don't have the time for this right now, but I'd love to be on there some other time. I've had the opportunity to speak to some of my heroes in music education. So having you, Dr. Mangini, on, having Dr. Tim, Paula Kreider, all these different big names that you see on your textbooks and other things in music education. In 5th grade, I was working out of Essential Elements. So I didn't know what the names of the people on there were in 5th grade, nor did I care in 5th grade. But it's just such a small, wonderful world. And that's what I tell to everyone who are my peers right now. I'm like, reach out to people. If you want a question answered, if you want to learn something more, shoot an email, send them an email, find a way to contact them. Because the worst that happens is you just don't get a response. It's like, oh, well, just keep moving on. But on the other hand of that, you can start up a network of communication, and then you have this great figure to help guide you, to help support you. And that's what it is just music education is fantastic.
Yeah. Eric, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Phil.
No, I was going to say, I was going to touch on something that Eric said real quick, because it was so funny. He talks about, well, I didn't really pay much attention to the names on the front of the book. And I'll never forget, my wife was a choir director at a church in Elk City, Oklahoma. And we were having the 50th anniversary of the Presbyterian church choir. And I'm sitting next to this guy, and we got to talking, and we started talking band, and he was so passionate, and then telling me, and he goes, I had a method book at one time. And I was like, really? And then all of a sudden the lights started going off, because I remembered my method book when I went through beginning band was Division of Beat by Harry Haynes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Harry Haynes that was sitting next to me. And I was just like, oh my gosh, the guy that wrote my beginning band book. And at this time I was like, I think I was 25 years old. So it had been, 15 years since I had gone through beginning band or something like that. But it was wild that you made that connection as well, Eric.
Yeah, and they become lifelong friends and colleagues, Eric. So, I think it's really cool that you're doing that. And, and I really encourage more people to not be afraid to get shot down, because they're not going to get shot down. People are looking forward to it. They want to help. The music education community is such a helpful community. We take care of each other. We support each other. At least we should do that. So Dr. Payne, you were mentioning that you guys select a topic that you're going to do for the season. So do you do the topic and then try to find guests to fit the topic? Do you identify guests and try to develop a topic around it? Or is it some sort of combination of both of those?
I think over the evolution, it's kind of done, we've had a little bit of both, but lately it's been pick a topic that we think will be really apropos to the season. So right now we're looking at pedagogy. Well, when we started talking about pedagogy, then we started thinking about, okay, what direction do we want to take? So like last week, we had been talking about, well, beginning band is something that we have a little bit of exposure to in undergrad, but we really don't get to spend a whole lot of time on it. So let's really dig into that a little bit deeper. And so we contacted Darcy and she was more than gracious enough to come on and share her insights with us. And so that was a fantastic conversation. But then he and I start to share names of, all right, who do we think would be a good fit here? Who do we think? And so we've got kind of a big board going on. And I think some of that's also influenced too about our own influences and the people that have inspired us as teachers. And so being able to talk with, having a chance to talk with them is always fantastic. But essentially how it has grown has been, what should be our next broad topic? And then we begin to find out, all right, who fits under that umbrella? And then let's really narrow in on what we want to chat with them about and build that scheme for the entire, or schematic for the entire season.
Yeah. So, Eric, how's the pandemic altered or influenced what you've been doing on the podcast?
So the biggest thing is just the fact that when things first started going down, it was like, okay, what do we do? And honestly, my first priority was thinking about what I was going to do for myself, because figuring out school and everything was definitely kind of like, oh my goodness, this is much different than I've ever dealt with. And for the listeners at home, I apologize for my dog right now. But anyways, going on, I reached out to Dr. Payne. I'm like, okay, how do we want to alter this? How do we want to shift this? And honestly, the pandemic brought up kind of a little bit of a turning point because of this wonderful video conferencing app called Zoom, and the fact that we knew the majority of people around the country had time on their hands. So we decided to shift. We used to be bi-weekly, so every other week. So we decided to shift to a weekly format. We took some time to plan out a shortened season to end out the spring semester. And then we just kind of been rolling from there. We've stuck with the weekly format, and Zoom has been great for being able to reach out to people because everyone knows how it works now. It's a really phenomenal opportunity. So yeah, honestly, it was a huge help for us in a weird way.
That's great. This podcast is going to the dogs.
Yeah.
Oh man. So, Dr. Payne, how's the pandemic altered or changed your approach to just teaching in general? You know, we all know hands-on music ed. Even when you're teaching music ed, education classes has a lot of work involved with it. And now you got to develop a whole class or unit virtually. And have you developed a class or unit on virtual music education? Have you integrated that into your program?
So, yeah, the short answer is yes. So, and it's been in stages. So in the spring, when we first shifted to online teaching, number one, the focus was the safety and well-being really of the students, and trying to figure out, okay, they are going to be shifting an entire schedule into a compact amount of time. So as a teacher, the first adjustment that I make is I said, okay, we have 8 weeks left in this session. What do they need to know? Not what do I want them to know, not how much can I cram into this next 8 weeks. It was, okay, in this course, what do they need to know? And once I whittled it down to there, then I started thinking, okay, we could spend a whole lot of time on Zoom and it may or may not be effective. So I want to have Zoom be a way for us to be able to just connect weekly so that we can see faces. And this was the time of the lockdown, so people weren't really moving around a whole lot. And so we used that time to be able to have face-to-face meetings. In between, I set up, experiences for them that would be helpful and would provide some good discussion questions for us to be able to interact with on a weekly basis. How that evolved during the summer, my summer master's program, we normally will bring in the students for a 1-week residency. And so this is primarily with grad students. And one of the things that I did there was I completely refocused our intro to grad studies because one of the skill sets there that we're starting to look at is how do you research, how do you find articles of interest, and how do you begin to put these together in whether it's academic writing or writing papers, so on and so forth. And so I reframed our entire final to be, I want you to research online and virtual learning, best practices, most effective approaches, what it would look like in the music classroom, and begin to fuse those together and develop a fully online music course. And so getting them to think outside of the box in that manner I found to be really effective. And really the feedback I got back from the students uh, was fantastic as well, because they were like, we needed this ability to be able to just sit back and reflect on what happened over the spring. Move forward into the fall. Now going in, we knew that there was a good chance that much of this was going to be online. And I think while it's not a positive, one of the strengths of what has emerged from this pandemic is the fact that as music educators, we've been able to really focus and center on what our philosophy of music education really is. Why do we teach music to our students? And it has allowed us to teach some things that we've never been able to get to because we've been focused on a performance or focused on a festival, and it's allowed us to take a step back and really evaluate what we feel is most important for our students to learn. As far as this year, I really worked to flip my classes so that we could have more value in the time that we are on campus together. And so it's much more active based once we're in class together, as opposed to necessarily a lot of, what would I say? A lot of lecturing, for lack of a better term. But one of the drawbacks there is being able to discuss and being able to interact with each other because of the social distancing rules and the use of masks. That becomes a little bit tricky. So then trying to figure out how to use the technology that we do have to emulate what those discussions would be like, and how we would run a classroom, but do it in a virtual format. So I would say, in short form, I would say it's allowed us to really prioritize what we want our students to know, and really what they need to know to be successful music educators, and has allowed us to hone in on that a little more effectively than we necessarily have in the past.
Yeah. Eric, as a music education major, are there any benefits from virtual learning, things that make it even better than face-to-face instruction?
I can't honestly say that virtual by any means is better than in person. I do think there's certain benefits that there are, like within a virtual learning environment. I do think it's a little bit more accessible sometimes, and it's also great that all these lectures are recorded. I find that a very valuable resource to be able to look back. It's like, okay, if I wasn't necessarily able to either attend a class or if something's happened, because we're all at home and things happen whenever you're at home and stuff. So it's nice to be able to use those as reference points. But honestly, this last year of college has been some of the hardest in school I've had, of just trying to work on managing time. And managing, it's like, okay, I need to make sure I'm keeping up my physical health, keeping up my mental health and stuff, because I'm sitting down a lot of the time and I'm staring at a screen a lot of the time, which is definitely a challenge. I joke around that this pandemic has presented an opportunity to learn how to be flexible. I find especially music education majors aren't very good at being flexible most of the time. So it's a steep learning curve. But I'm ready for when things get back to whatever the new norm is going to look like.
Yeah. And how about you, Dr. Payne? I mean, any benefits that you've experienced or any limitations that you see?
I spoke a little bit last time. Some of the benefits, I would say, from a teaching perspective, it's allowed me to get a better grasp of what I truly find is important, and really how to convey that more effectively to the students. One of the things that I've noticed is, because of the way that I've restructured some of the work, the students are more reflective. They have more connected responses. Not that they didn't in the past, but their ability to interact with the content has shifted, at least anecdotally in my courses. And so that's been a pleasant surprise. I would say the limitation, and I know this is shared with everyone else, but there is such a human element to education. This ability to be in person, especially with music, the ability to make music with one another is so powerful. The ability to teach someone music is so powerful that eliminating that human contact is very difficult. The the spending of time on screens is not a substitute for human contact, and so that and in some ways really wears on the person mentally more so than necessarily going from class to class, because we're not changing space, we're just changing, the face in front of us. And so that I find that to be troublesome in some ways. And I think from a teaching perspective, um, I think as professors, we're trying to recreate some experiences the best that we can, knowing full well that we can't get the best option available. So we're picking kind of like the best of the rest, if you will, of what we have available, and we're just going to have to go with that and try to make that work as we move forward. But there's not a great answer right now, and so I think there's some lessons to be learned from that, especially in the education world, is that we're not always going to have the best technology. We're not always going to have the best musicians in our group. We're not always going to have that. We're always looking for ways to adjust, and I think in some ways this is preparing us for preparing our students to be successful in the classroom in some ways. But there's also the same way that the big talk right now with public schools is this idea of the achievement gap, of that students just aren't going to be as far along as they were. We're going to see that as these teachers go into the classroom for the first time. There is going to be a steeper learning curve for these first year teachers that are entering that experienced the pandemic and went to all virtual learning and didn't have the advantage of having those hands-on interactions with students. And so we're going to see that. And I think as professors and music teacher educators, we need to be aware and stay vigilant on being able to say, all right, how can we help? How can we build that bridge to help you climb that steep learning curve a little bit easier, more efficiently, and effectively?
That's great. We're just about out of time. I know, Eric, you've got another commitment to get to with marching band, and Professor Frank Trace will have you running laps if you're not there on time. Or
he'll probably do worse than that.
Oh man,
I can't say what he might do.
He's a good guy. He's one of the best in the business. But so, Eric, you got any final thoughts you'd like to share about music ed, about being a music student, podcasting? I mean, the fact that the K-State football team beat Oklahoma and Norman this year. I mean, anything you want to make sure gets said?
But before I say my actual thing, that's might be a sore point for Dr. Payne still. He's an OU guy, but go Cats. 2-0 with Chris Kleiman. I guess we're just better than OU, But anyways, the most important thing I have to say, and Dr. Payne touched on this earlier, is for all those music ed students across the country and all those teachers right now too. You're not alone in this. As I said earlier, the music education community is such a wonderful small community to where you have so many different people. While you're going through your undergrad right now, really make sure you're reaching out to your friends, both for them and for yourselves. It's so important to just have that support system, be able to get through difficult times, whether you're going through a pandemic or whether it's just a normal year, because we all know music education is a heck of a degree program. So you're not alone. No doubt that senior or whatever you see in the courtyard or whatever has gone through those theory classes that you are currently going through and struggling. someone who's just recently graduated out of teaching, reach out to them. They went through that same thing of having to design those units, design those lesson plans, and they have more experience right now. Just don't be afraid to reach out. This is not something that you have to do alone. This is definitely not something you should ever do alone. Trust your support system. And just one last thing, trust your professors. Reach out to your professors. They, for the most part, have gone through the same thing as you as well. It's kind of a pay it forward kind of thing is what music education is. And that's what the great educators in this field do, is they continue to pay it forward to where students like me can be inspired to want to be better music educators, continue to advance music, and then once again, pay it forward.
Pretty wise words from a guy that just trashed his professor about being from Oklahoma. I mean, he remember, Eric, he's still got a grade he's going to put on a card for you. So, that, and it's going to be a red mark because he's from Oklahoma. So you got to be careful of that. But seriously, Dr. Payne, Phil, if I may, it's got to be very rewarding to have a student that has this kind of global vision to help with the music education profession while still a student. How does that make you feel to be teaching a kid like Eric and having students like that are so excited about music education?
Well, it's extremely fulfilling, because one of the things that I share from the first time that they set foot on campus as freshmen is, part of my job is to, number one, make myself obsolete. And number two is we have and the way that I frame it is that the classroom is often seen as a game board. And we've had 18 years to perfect our roles as a student. And I have 4 years to help you flip the switch and to see that game board as a teacher. And so one of the things that I would say is having Eric come to me with this idea is fulfilling from the fact that he's seeing the classroom differently. He's seeing the profession at a more global view than some practicing teachers. And so what that does for me is that gives me confidence. Number one, obviously confidence in Eric, but confidence in that, continuing to nurture this program is going to continue to develop those kind of thinkers and those kind of problem solvers. And I think that's, as a teacher, those can be our strongest assets, the ability to think outside of the box, to be able to problem solve, and to be able to do that on our own, and to be able to know when to reach out and who to reach out to and how to build a network. All of those skills are so critical in being successful in this profession that, building that network ends up building the safety net below us. And so it's extremely gratifying, and I'm proud of all the work that Eric has done. And I just can't wait to see where it goes. It's exciting because I think he and I have talked a little bit about the student teaching experience, the first year teaching experience, and what this podcast is going to look like as it moves forward. And I'm just really excited for how it's going to develop.
That's fantastic. The podcast is called Not Your Forte, a guide to keeping music education simple. Eric Tinkler and Dr. Philip Payne of Kansas State University. Guys, it's been an honor to have you on my podcast, and I was honored to be on yours earlier this summer. So take care and go Cats, right?
Absolutely.
Yep, go Cats. Thank you so much.
Go Cats. Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. Take care, guys. Hope to see you soon.
All right, see you soon.
It's great to hear a student and a teacher work together, especially on a project that can have such great impact in our profession. I just love Eric, and I love his optimism, that youthful exuberance I talked about earlier in the podcast. And I love the line he said that the pandemic has presented us an opportunity to learn to be flexible. Isn't that the truth? And we got to remain flexible in all what we do, because when we're flexible, we can adjust to meet the needs of our students, just like Dr. Philip Payne has adjusted to meet the needs of his student, Eric Tinkler. It's a good relationship. It's a model for many of us. Well, that's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. We'll be back with more conversations. But for now, this is Charlie Mangini saying, Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends. If you would like to send a question to Charlie or have a comment, please send an email to bandtalkcharlie@gmail.com. We hope you will let your colleagues, students, and friends know about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again soon.